With a big night of fights under wraps, there's only one person we want to welcome back onto the program to help digest what we just saw. Conor McGregor going down to Dustin Poirier. It's a pleasure to welcome Laura Sanko to the Submission Ready UFC 257 post-fight show. Laura, thank you for staying up once again to join us. Unbelievable turnout here as we try and digest what we just witnessed over at Fight Island.
Yeah, what a crazy night. Some things played out the way I thought maybe they would. Some things were completely opposite the way that I saw them going. But man, what a memorable night. And there's no two people I would rather be staying up at 1:30 in the morning.
By the
1:30
way,
in the morning. I'm happy to be here with you guys.
the pleasure is ours, and you look fantastic for 1:30 in the morning. I don't know anyone else that looks this good at 1:30 in the morning as we kick off the pajama party.
I stood up before we started recording. I stood up and you saw that I was in fact wearing my pajamas, and I am actually slightly disappointed that I don't get to see you guys when we do these, because I've of course been watching. And Dennis, you have a lovely face.
Oh, I do. Oh, thank you. And by the way, I was going to say you don't want to see the submission ready pajamas. You know, we don't have anything nice. It's all torn up.
We sleep naked, so
usable.
This would be on OnlyFans if it was an official pajama party.
Pretty sure Casper sleeps naked, so it's good that this is the afternoon here in Australia. But Laura, I was going to say, you just mentioned how there are things that you expected, and then there were things that kind of surprised you. And I want to sort of kick things off with this Conor McGregor fight if we can. Some of the stuff that surprised me was just the lead up to this fight. It just seemed like to me Conor McGregor was going to switch into that sort of animalistic Conor McGregor that we see as he gets closer and closer to the fight day. And you kind of saw a little bit of that at the weigh-in. He was trying to be really nice to Dustin, but there were parts of him. You saw the eyes sort of darting around. You saw he was just ready to go rearing. You could see he was in great fight shape. But then when he walked out to the octagon, sort of walked around that octagon, it kind of felt a little bit different to me. I don't know if you guys would agree. Did you feel that way? Kind of a different feeling from Conor McGregor for this one.
Yeah, I felt like it was a different feeling all week. And I think part of me appreciated it because it sort of, in some ways, reflected this more mature Conor, who still is very willing to talk about, you know, how much he's built inside of this company, but at the same time, much more respectful. The thing that I noticed the most, and it kind of happened again in the post-fight press conference, was there were a couple times where I felt like he was getting emotional, where you could literally hear the emotion in his voice, both in the Wednesday press conference when Dan Hardy's right-hand guy read out the quote that he had given earlier, you know, about the sport of MMA making him, you know, go mad, and all of the things that he wanted to build. And then this post-fight press conference, again, when the idea of fans and what his fans meant to him came up, you could hear the catch in his throat. And I've just never really seen that side of him. And I don't know, to hear him say that he wasn't that upset, I guess. I don't know. And obviously still digesting what happened, that really struck me. It's definitely a different Conor. And I think it remains to be seen if this new Conor is maybe less hungry. I don't know. Maybe not for me to say that yet, but definitely different. Definitely a different Conor.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and that was kind of my takeaway as well. I like to see that Conor, kind of like the Nate Diaz Conor when he lost, and he was identifying all the problems that he made in the fight and what he needs to improve on. And we saw that, and I thought that was excellent. And the fact that after the fight, he was just like, let me get back in there. You know, my time away didn't really help me. But I agree with you, Laura, 100%. The fact that, you know, he was upset, but he kind of said that he wasn't that upset, and he used the word content, and that's not... if you spoke to Conor in 2014, there's no way he would be using the word content. And I'm not trying to make a mountain out of a molehill, but I'm like you. I think that we have to see, is this Conor as hungry as he was in the past when he was scratching and clawing for anything, as opposed to now, you know, sleeping and waking up in silk sheets. Imagine the pajama party.
How can you be?
Right?
How can you
He's
be
got a lot to
hungry
go
when
home
you're
to.
sitting at a feast? It's not... It is really difficult to manufacture a situation around yourself that makes you feel that hunger, because that hunger before was, I don't want to be on government assistance. I don't want to be a fucking plumber. I want to be the champion of the world. I want to give my girlfriend a car for every day of the week. It's really hard to manufacture what gave you that feeling, that drive for every, and it's not just in the fight, it's every round at practice, every go in a drilling session, all of that stuff. And it's really hard to be hungry when you're sitting at a feast and when you are surrounded by people who are aware of who you are. Like, I just kept thinking, and I feel like I don't mean to take over the show, but there's just so much in my head. I kept thinking, the other thing that really struck me, he sounded surprised about calf kicks, right? Now, of course, he's aware of what they are. Of course, they go over them. Of course, John Kavanaugh, an amazing coach, would prepare him for that. But to me, what that sounded like was, I have a very insular camp. I don't have a camp where guys are coming in and I'm forced to spar with all different types of people in the room. And I'll tell you what, I don't care who you are. If you're sparring Conor McGregor, you are well aware of how much money is on the line. And if you injure him, how big of a dick are you, right? So I don't see guys blasting him with calf kicks in sparring sessions. And he hasn't been fighting enough. He even said it. He hasn't been fighting enough to know what that feels like in a fight. It's inactivity, but it's also, you're at a feast and you're in a camp where everything is so perfectly tailored for you. You would think that would create this ultra athlete. And I'm sure in some ways it does. I'm sure his nutrition is so specific to him and his sleep and all these things. But when it comes to like the grimy, gritty throwing down, if I'm a training partner for Conor McGregor, I'm being really fucking careful with him. Excuse my language.
No, and it's also, Conor McGregor is such a fan of watching fights, and a man that he knows very well, Israel Adesanya, using those calf kicks against Paulo Costa. And you think maybe the Conor McGregor of old would have watched that footage back. I'm sure he is always keeping an eye on you, guys like Israel, guys signed to Paradigm, and think, well, what would happen if that happened to me? And we were speaking to Bas Rutten in the preview, and he got up and he did a full stance thing, and he was talking about how the kicks and the calf kicks could be an issue for a guy like Conor McGregor. So I feel like the Conor of old would have been trying all this stuff out, and I think he hit the nail on the head. Like, how could you ignore such an important shift in MMA and not even try that in your camp going into the fight? It's a pretty good point you're making.
Even Anthony Smith and I on our semi-annual podcast, we talked about it. I felt kind of ridiculous bringing it up. In fact, I think that was like how I tossed the whole topic of the Conor Poirier fight to him. Was I felt like people were not talking about the stance enough, the fact that they're fighting in a closed stance. Now, again, of course, Conor has fought other southpaw fighters before, but specifically that strike, specifically the calf kick for a closed stance fighter. But when you're a southpaw, most of the time you're fighting in an open stance, you're sparring in an open stance. And I'm telling you, that calf kick we've seen it time and time again. It is so difficult to defend, but particularly from the closed stance, and checking it isn't really a thing. You just kind of need to not be there, or you need to make people pay as soon as they start tagging you with it. You need to find some sort of offense to come over the top with. But
and sometimes it only takes one or two, and you're basically done for the whole fight. And I think that's the big difference between the calf kick and a lot of the other kicks we've seen people throw, that it's a real detriment. If you land it once or twice correctly, that completely changes up your game.
Sean O'Malley, Cheeto Vera, prime example.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And you can't just gut it out. It's not a, oh, I'm not tough enough to just keep fighting through pain. It's not pain, it's nerve damage. Yeah. You can't make yourself mentally fix that or just keep fighting through it.
And this is something that we've seen in Benson Henderson, I believe, before he was even the UFC champion. So this isn't any kind of new phenomenon. But I want to ask you about, obviously, Dustin Poirier, who put on arguably the performance of his life. It's kind of crazy when you look at some of the guys that he's fought in recent times after the Michael Johnson knockout loss. This was his easiest. This was his best probably career performance, and he's fought guys like Alvarez, guys like Gaethje, guys like Max Holloway, guys like Dan Hooker, who all had more success against Dustin Poirier than Conor did tonight. I'm wondering what you thought of the game plan, the performance that he put on with the calf kicks, mixing in his wrestling, trying to tire Conor out, and just I guess what you make of such a great performance.
I thought it was textbook. I thought Dustin looked like, especially coming into that second round, it was like you could just see it on his face, like, I got him now, because everybody, that was the narrative. And I think it was the correct narrative coming in, that Conor is extremely dangerous early. And particularly if you allow him the space to work his magic and create his artistry, like he talks about, if you allow him to fight at his range, he's one of the best in the world. I mean, I still, even in that fight, the timing that he has on that left hand is incredible. But Dustin ate a left hand, I remember, and you could just see on his face, it didn't feel good, but it was like, oh, I just ate that. I'm still standing. I'm still here. Let's go, And then when he came out in the second round, you could tell that he knew Conor was going to be more tired. He knew that those calf kicks were starting to affect him. And a big part of Conor's game, although he's not a guy who moves around a lot, he uses his movement in a different way than a lot of people do because of the really wide stance. He has to be able to have a lot of weight on that lead leg, push off of it, and it took away his game as well. So, I mean, I think Dustin, and of course, coming from the camp like ATT, you would expect it, came in with the perfect game plan, and he executed it, but he executed it with a great deal of confidence. And I think that confidence is really what like hit my heart watching him. When he's pointing at Conor, Dustin a few years ago never would have been able to do that. He went out there and he knew that he had what it took to beat this guy who beat him 6 years ago. And it's such a perfect bookend. I'm not saying that he's, his career is ending by any stretch of the imagination, but it's such a perfect bookend because the Conor loss was really what started the upward trajectory. So it's so cool to see him sort of cap off at least this part of his career with an incredible, incredible stoppage win.
Absolutely. And you'd imagine a lot of hot sauce bottles being bought at the moment by people all over the world.
I'll take some.
Yeah, I was going to say, what do you make of Conor McGregor's mental game, trash talk, and the impact that it has on his opponents and in his fights? Because going into this fight, we saw a lot of hugging. We saw Conor being very sort of making Dustin feel welcome, being very family friendly. And also didn't have the same intensity, even though he did have quite a bit of success at the beginning of the fight. He didn't have the same intensity, right before the fight started. Usually he's circling around like, kind of like a rabid dog. He walks out, does his, $1 million walk or a $1 billion walk, and it's just a whole scene. And you could almost compare it to a Mike Tyson. You could compare it to Khabib. You could compare it to Anderson Silva before he got figured out. How much do you think that plays into a Conor McGregor performance? And do you think it was I suppose a detractor in this one and in letting Dustin kind of get comfortable a little bit sooner than maybe he would have if it was still around going into this one?
I think Conor is nothing if not authentic. I don't think any time that he was like that in the past that it was something that he had to fake, that he had to like practice in his hotel room, like, oh, I'm going to say this and then I'll say this. I think Conor just is. And that was who he was back then, and that was working for him back then. And I think it goes back to what we said at the top of the show. He's just a different person now. And I honestly think that a lot of the struggles he's had in his personal life, the legal issues that he's faced, feeling like everything, including his career, maybe his family, maybe his marriage, all of these things could have been taken away from him if some of these issues had played out differently, or if they had been seen to be true, which I'm not saying that they are, but the threat of all of this being taken away from me made him appreciate it more, and it made him more humble. And I think so when he returned to the game out of love for the game, it was like in a different mental space, and with, I guess that's it, with love. He was there because he loved fighting. And so, excuse my dog.
I think you might have an intruder. We might need to pause this for a second. Did you just release the hounds, Laura? What's going on?
I have an old bulldog and she's sick. So I'm so sorry, but that's my dog coughing.
Oh, no. I hope she gets better.
I lost my train of thought, but no, I just think he's in a different place in his life. And so I don't know if we're going to see someone's gonna have to draw that out of him. Dustin Poirier, how could you trash talk Dustin Poirier, especially Dustin Poirier now? I mean, he's such a lovely person, lovely human being. So I think it's gonna take someone pulling that out of Conor for him to go there again. I couldn't, like, if he were to fight, I'm not saying he's going to, but if he were to fight Michael Chandler again, I just don't see that happening because he's just a nice human being. So has Conor lost an edge?
I think Khabib would draw that out of him, but I think that fight's dead now. I think that's you could hear it in Dana White's voice. He was very disappointed that on tonight this fight fell apart.
Yes, I think that the minute Conor got TKO'd, that fight evaporated, and I don't see Khabib obviously doesn't need to fight Dustin again, and I don't think that there's enough intrigue with Michael Chandler. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight, but I think from Khabib's perspective, that doesn't necessarily add to his legacy enough to pull him out of, a decision he's basically already made.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't seem like a whole lot really changed after that phone call with Khabib. It looks like he's still retired. But how good would you feel if you picked Dustin to knock out Conor McGregor, not only win, but knock him out? You would be probably buying your own yacht right now with the winnings and the money you made on that kind of bet. And there is only one place you should go for that feeling and those kind of bets, and that is mybookie.ag. Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, Cass. And if you sign up with the promo code submission, MyBookie will match your deposit halfway up to $1,000. So make sure to visit MyBookie online today. Don't miss out on the big payout. Some huge fights coming up. MyBookie.ag.
Yeah, that's right. And if you're looking to gain more confidence or just go through life feeling all around better, don't forget to use Manscaped's Lawnmower 3.0, the best grooming tool on the market. Isn't that right, Dennis?
Yeah, man. You can go on the website, get a shed travel bag. Make sure to get that foot duster. Or how about some ball wipes? Manscaped's got it all. Manscaped.com. Code word submission will get you 20% off and free shipping. So no excuses, guys.
That's right. And if you're having a hard time watching the fights, any fights for that matter, or any channel all around the world, if maybe you're in Australia, you want to switch up your region to make your computer, tablet, or phone think you're in a different part of the world, use a VPN like Pure VPN, who are giving away excellent deals right now. Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, Cass. Go to link.purevpn.com/submission now. Use the code word submission and get your 10% discount. And you can also try it for 99 cents for a whole 7 days. So there's no excuses, guys. Stop missing out on all your favorite movies and shows around the world. As we sort of look at Conor McGregor and what's next from before we look at Dustin in the title picture, Laura, the big fight, Nate Diaz trilogy. It almost seems like this is the perfect time. A lot of people would have thought, well, if he beat Dustin, where does Nate really rank in terms of the title picture, especially if he doesn't fight Justin Gaethje and beat him? Now it seems like it's a perfect time to run this back, maybe at 155. Do you agree? Is this the next big move?
I completely agree. I think that's your most obvious choice. I think a Tony fight maybe could be put in there. I think there's probably some more obvious opponents for Tony. And I would even dangle Jorge in there only because I still feel like that fight would have enough star power in it to be an interesting fight. Not title implications, kind of a weird weight class because I know Conor wants to stay at 55. So I kind of rank that third. But yes, I think that the Nate fight is now probably the most logical answer. I like it.
I think it's a great fight. I think it'd be fun to sort of revisit that. There's also kind of some poetry about how that was the fight that really changed Conor. He had to go through that rebuilding phase, and I don't know, maybe that would kind of awaken something between discovering calf kicks for the first time and feeling how they felt, and then going back and training for Nate. I don't know. I think it'd be interesting. I feel like for Khabib, I don't think he will necessarily return, but if he does, for me, the Chandler fight is probably the most exciting fight. Don't want to see the Dustin fight again, and there's not really, maybe Oliveira, that's interesting, but I don't see Khabib being too excited about that. I think Chandler's sort of an exciting one, but if you're looking at Dustin Poirier, who kind of reestablished himself as a title contender, right? After the Khabib loss, he was kind of written off, but now in a Khabib-less division, and Dustin getting the biggest win of his career, what do you think is sort of next for Dustin Poirier? Would you prefer the Michael Chandler fight, Dustin and Chandler for the belt?
Yeah, I like Dustin and Chandler for the belt. I mean, in a perfect world, I'd love to see. I don't know. I just don't think it's going to happen. I was about to say in a perfect world, I would see Khabib versus Chandler because I think that Chandler's style of wrestling might actually posed some interesting questions for Khabib, just because folk style is so different than what Khabib does, where he mostly wrestles off the cage. Chandler's great on the open mat, which is honestly not where Khabib wrestles the best. So I'd be fascinated to see how that played out. Obviously, Chandler's got some hands too. I just don't think that's going to happen. So my mind is immediately on what does Chandler Poirier look like, and I think Dana kind of alluded to that in the post fight press conference. It sounds like, it just sounds like the phone call with Khabib was, while not an official retirement / vacation of the belt, it felt that way when he was describing what they talked about.
Poor Dana White, he just wasn't very happy in the press conference at all. Not only that, but also like with Biden possibly ruining plans with like isolations and quarantines. He just didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. I felt real bad for him. Just quickly, as we before we move off Conor, and just quickly mention the co-main, when Conor McGregor lost against Nate Diaz on that first time, the world was a little bit shocked. Everybody thought he was going to do it, and then we saw him come back and have this amazing run. And now when we see, and then of course when he lost against Khabib, we knew that the lead up to that fight wasn't ideal. We knew he had a lot of personal problems. We knew that wasn't the best Conor McGregor. Now we've got a Conor McGregor. He wasn't very active, and he said the inactivity played a major role. But where do you sort of put this loss, and how do you feel about Conor McGregor right now, Laura? Because I suppose there are people right now online saying maybe this is it. Maybe he's slowing down. Maybe the reaction speed isn't the same. We've seen it happen. We've seen slowdowns happen in people in their prime, people like Tyson, people like Muhammad Ali, sort of earlier on in their career. Or do you believe it's just what he says, the fact that he hasn't been around long enough, the fact that he hasn't really been trying out this new stuff, like working calf kicks and figuring out his game plan around that stuff?
I do think it's inactivity. I think he's still physically at his peak, but I think he's priced himself out of a market where he makes it really difficult to be active in a way like Kevin Holland can be active, right? You can't, Conor's not going to fight 5 times in 1 year. We don't have the schedule to support that, particularly when, not only just what he makes per fight, but like the whole X factors of where and, Dana really wanting there to be an audience and a gate. And although I think that idea is kind of like, okay, well, I may not get that for a while. So chuck that idea out the window. There's so much that surrounds Conor being on a card and having to be the main event, then you can't put him on a card where there's a championship, because you can't, it just creates a situation where it's really difficult for him to be as active as I think he would need to be to get back to where his skills are sharp and he's hungry and he's just as active as he needs to be to stay in the game and not be at the feast all the time. It's hard to be hungry when you waltz off a yacht, and that's no knock on him. I would live on that yacht too, right? I mean, what's he supposed to do? Drive a jalopy and stay at the Ramada Inn? Of course he's going to do that.
Pulls up in a Honda Civic 1992 with a PS1 in the back.
It's a fascinating and very tricky situation, like I said, to try to manufacture the situation, the psychology that made you hungry in the first place when you have achieved everything you thought you set out to achieve. And now you're just doing it for the love of the game. Well, how much do you love this game? You got to find that and figure out how to create circumstances around yourself. And I'm not saying he can't, it's not like he's going to sell all his stuff and live in an apartment again, but you got to figure out a way to tap into that old psychology.
Yeah, you see his luxury yacht on Facebook Marketplace. And the funny thing is, when you say you've got love for the game, you love the game because everybody loves you. But if you keep losing, the game's not that much fun to love.
No.
And your family starts telling you, hey, you're getting serious injuries here. Maybe it's time to stop. So you can't be in that position for long. But I was just going to say, how funny would it be if he had this trilogy with Nate Diaz and Dustin goes on, becomes the champion, and then he has like double trilogies back to back. He has like Nate Diaz trilogy, wins that, looks like Conor Revolt, Dustin becomes champion, and then they do another trilogy, and this all happens like in 2021. That would be pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's a real possibility. What you just paid. I was thinking the exact same thing before we even got on. I'm like, this guy's just going to keep fighting the same people over and over.
By the way,
But I'm here for it. I'll buy it.
By the way, there was something almost odd seeing Conor get knocked out like that. Like, you get so accustomed to seeing him take such big shots and his chin holding up, even going back to like the Chad Mendes days, and to see him, against the cage knocked out. Dustin Poirier hits incredibly hard, so it's not really, surprising or inconceivable to imagine, but I guess it's another thing that adds to that narrative of like, where is he at physically as well? Is he slowing down? And, his extracurricular activities, are they catching up to him? But I guess we're going to find out, if and when he returns. But I got to ask you, Laura, obviously, you were a former fighter yourself, so you understand the mental game. Just try and put it in perspective. For a guy like Michael Chandler to completely avoid UFC jitters and put on such an incredible performance, I mean, for you, what does that sort of take? And not only that, but then deliver the promo that he delivered afterwards. And also, what do you make of him as an actual title contender in the UFC? This is kind of the dream for Dana, right? To put a lot of money into a new prospect. Nice. And then to have it pay off and, have a new contender in the division.
It's really exciting to have a new spice added to the top of this division, where we're getting to the point where it's like this weird MMA math where everyone has fought to someone and someone's lost to someone. So for Chandler to come in here and just, create this sort of fresh scenario, and man, did he do it in an impressive fashion. And you could just see like the smile that he had on his face the entire time that he was walking out. Just, you could see him. And honestly, I don't want to take away from his excellence, because you could just tell that he was on from the moment that bell rang. But at the same time, something about Dan Hooker seemed off to me tonight. And I don't know what to attribute it to. I don't know if it's the only thing technically that I could think of when I was watching it, as I thought, man, he's focused. Part of his brain is focused on defending the takedown, and he just can't shut that part of his brain off and relax and get into his room. He was doing a great job of avoiding Chandler. And you could see Michael kind of getting not frustrated, but sort of like searching. Oh, I can't find him. I'm just gonna, okay, I'll step back. I'll kind of reassess. I'll reset, and then coming in and hunting again. And that right hand, that 2 to the body, if you'll remember, was the first significant strike that Michael landed. And it didn't even really land super flush, because I think Dan was like moving laterally to the side, so it sort of just clipped him. But that was the first strike that he went for. And so, that was a combination that he had been not playing in this camp. So what a debut in the UFC. And we've seen these phenomenal Bellator fighters come over and just not do well, just not play out. And I was really interested and nervous to see, because the truth about Chandler is, you watch him fight and he has moments and I'm talking about in Bellator, moments of greatness. And you can see, man, what an athlete, what an incredible wrestler, what heavy hands. But you look at his resume and it's like, okay, Benson Henderson win, great, but we're not talking about Benson Henderson of 2013. Sydney Outlaw, the loss to it's not like he's got this resume where you go, oh man, that's a world beater right there. You have to watch his tape to know what he's capable of. And so I guess my point saying that is he went out there and exceeded my expectations.
Yeah. And also Dan Hooker taking off those gloves in the octagon out of frustration. But I mean, I just feel like there's so much good stuff out there for Dan Hooker, and he's just such a good fighter. And who knows what was going on. A lot of these guys struggle at fighting at these weird times in the middle of the morning with the racetrack and the cars going through and you can't sleep. And some people just do better in these situations. And I wonder how much that even affected a guy like Conor McGregor, who hasn't experienced this weird bubble thing. At least Dustin went to the apex and sort of experienced it a little bit. So we'll hope he sticks around. But for now, guys, she is, of course, Laura Sanko. Make sure to follow her at Laura_Sanko on Instagram and Twitter. And we really appreciate you staying up for us. We hope that the Bulldog caught the intruder, and we can't wait. We can't wait for you to be on color commentary and just on commentary in general. We see there's a lot of petitions out there. Keep going on social. Keep putting it out there. it's around the corner. I feel, Laura. You'll
I
forget us soon. You're not going to be staying up to 1:30 when you're doing the calls.
I appreciate it. I'll be calling some fights next week at the LFA, so I'm excited to be doing that again. And then, yeah, we'll see. One day we'll make it happen. Thank you guys so much.